Welcome, my dear listener. It's time to let the world grow quiet. Let the thoughts of the day drift out like small boats into the open sea, floating gently beyond the horizon of your mind. You are safe here, warm and still, wrapped in soft covers. And the hush of night. Tonight I'll tell you a story of quiet evenings by the sea, of smooth sea glass kissed by time, and of two hearts finding one another like waves meeting the shore. There is no rush, no worry, only the rhythm of breath, and the sound of tides, slowly turning memories into treasures. So lie back, close your eyes if you haven't already, and let yourself sink softly into this tender tale. A tale of a man who walked the shoreline each dusk, searching not just for glass but for something his heart had always known was waiting. Let's begin. The beach was always quiet at dusk, not silent, no, never silent, for the sea had its own way of whispering, always speaking softly to those who would listen. The waves moved with slow intention, brushing the shore like a lullaby that never truly ended. And there, each evening just before the sun dipped behind the horizon, Luca would walk, step by slow step, boots crunching lightly over damp sand and pebble, his coat always loose at the collar, scarf tucked gently beneath, hands folded behind his back. He wasn't looking for anything. Not really. And yet, his eyes always scanned the earth, following the glow of the tide's edge, searching for glimmers of sea glass, not the bright kind, not the green shards or frosted blues that others might pocket with glee. No, Luca was drawn to the quiet ones, the palest whites, the softest grays, pieces that felt like moonlight had held them, that shimmered with the kind of warmth a dream leaves behind when morning stirs. He believed quietly, tenderly, that sea glass held memory, and not memory of things past, but of things not yet lived, moments waiting to happen, loves waiting to be found. The villagers, kind and familiar, often waved to him from their porches. Still searching, Luca? And he would nod with a soft smile. Just walking, he'd reply. But he knew it wasn't just walking. Each step was a longing, quiet, unspoken. Each piece of glass, a promise. He didn't know where the belief had come from, only that it lived in him like salt lives in the sea. And on this evening, a gentle one, with skies painted lavender and peach, the air was especially still. The tide had left behind a trail of soft treasures, and Luca's hands cupped a few pieces already, nestled like pearls in his palm. But then, something shifted near the curve of the old driftwood log, half buried in sea foam. His eyes caught something, a shimmer, faint and glowing. He bent slowly, the way one bends to cradle something sleeping. And there, nestled in the sand like it had been placed with care, was a piece of sea glass, and like any other. It was pale as fog, smooth as river stone, and as he lifted it into the dying light, it pulsed not with light, but with warmth. Luca closed his fingers gently around it, and just for a moment he felt something shift inside, not loudly, not urgently, just a quiet feeling. Like someone, somewhere, had been waiting for him to find it, and the wind, which had been still all evening, lifted slightly then, carrying with it the scent of lavender. And something else, something like memory. He didn't know it yet. But the path ahead had begun to curve. A quiet journey was waiting, and the sea, in its own way, had begun to hum a new lullaby. Later that evening, Luca stood at the edge of the shore, the sea glass still in his hand. The tide had retreated further now, leaving a smooth shimmer over the wet sand, like glass itself had melted and stretched across the beach. The piece he'd found felt warm against his palm. Not hot, just gently warm, like something living. It pulsed faintly, not with light, but with presence, as though it remembered being found, as though it had waited to be held again. Luca turned it slowly in his fingers, and for the first time, in many evenings, he didn't head straight home when the light began to fade. Instead, he followed the curve of the beach, not toward the village, but the other way, toward the cliffs, where the shoreline grew quiet and the rocks whispered with the sea. The sand grew softer there, more golden. His footsteps made less sound, and the hush that met him was different, not just silence, but invitation. It was then that he saw it tucked between two sloping dunes, behind a veil of wild grass and salt-blown petals, a narrow path, half hidden. He had never seen it before, or maybe he had passed it countless times and simply never felt the need to step into it, but tonight. The moment asked for it, and so he did. The path led downward, and the grass brushed gently at his ankles. There were small shells underfoot, smooth and dry, and the scent of the sea deepened, not sharper, but sweeter somehow, like sun-warmed driftwood and something faintly floral. And then after a turn and then a bend he arrived, a hidden cove, quiet, still, cradled by tall stones softened by time, and a stretch of sand that looked like it had not been touched in years. The water there shimmered differently, paler, calmer, as if it had come to rest and scattered along the shore. Sea glass, not just pieces here and there. Dozens, maybe hundreds, tucked into the sand like sleeping birds, each one glimmering faintly. Each one softly different muted blues, ghostly greens, pearly whites, and soft rose pinks that seemed to blush beneath the sky. Luca stepped forward, not with urgency, but with reverence. And as he walked, he noticed something more: footprints. Light, bare ones, a single pair, moving gently among the glass. Someone else had been here, recently, and perhaps still was. He felt no fear, no alarm, only a growing sense of quiet wonder. He followed the footprints as they curved toward the rocks, where a low, smooth ledge offered a place to sit. The wind here was soft and rhythmic, like breath, and in the breeze he heard something delicate, a voice soft, like someone speaking not to be heard, but to be felt, and around the bend of the stone he saw her. She was seated on the ledge, her knees drawn close, her hands open in her lap, in them pieces of sea glass, and she was whispering to them, one by one, as if greeting old friends, or returning stories to their rightful home. She hadn't seen him yet. Her face was turned to the sea, eyes half-lidded, calm, and Luca stood still, the way one does when entering a sacred place, a moment that is too gentle to disturb. He watched her, the way her hair moved like tide grass in the breeze, the way her fingertips lingered on each piece, the way her lips curled at the edges as she whispered. And then, as if she had known all along, she turned. Their eyes met. No words. Not yet, only stillness, and the feeling of something long awaited unfolding. The sea behind them whispered on, and above, the sky deepened into violet. The first star appeared, faint and watching, and so began the softest part of the journey, not just through the hidden cove, but into the space between two hearts, where words are not needed, and silence becomes the most tender form of touch. The breeze quieted, just a little, as the moment stretched between them. Luca remained where he stood, one hand at his side, the other still loosely cupping the warm piece of sea glass. And she, this stranger wrapped in soft blue linen and sea salt, calm, met his gaze without surprise, only serenity, as though she'd known he would come. After a few heartbeats, she offered the smallest nod, a silent welcome. And with gentle steps, Luca crossed the remaining distance, never rushing, never breaking the hush that held the cove like a soft shell around them. He stopped just a few paces from her, and then she spoke, in a voice as light as foam. "You've found one of the warm ones." Her eyes drifted to his hand. Luca looked down at the sea glass in his palm, still warm, still smooth, as if it pulsed with its own remembering. He nodded slowly. It was waiting, a smile curved on her lips. Small, wistful, knowing. She extended her hand, not to take the glass, but to show him what she held. Her own palm was filled with pieces, gentle greens, smoky lavenders, faint creams, each one soft-edged, matte with time. "They all wait," she whispered, looking at them with a kind of reverence, "not just to be found, but to be recognized." They sat together then, no explanation, no names, only presence. Luca lowered himself beside her, not too close, but close enough to feel the warmth of her nearness. Their hands rested between them, open, each holding pieces of the sea's long patience. The tide swayed softly in the distance. Somewhere, far off, a gull called once, then was silent. "Do you believe?" she asked quietly, her voice nearly blending with the wind, that memories can arrive before the moments they belong to. Luca tilted his head, thoughtful. "I think some things are remembered before they happen," he replied, just as softly, like the way you can miss someone you haven't met. Their eyes met again, and in that gaze, quiet, open, without question or pressure, something passed between them. Not urgency, not need, but recognition, like meeting someone whose voice had already echoed through your dreams. They began to speak then, slowly, of nothing and everything, of glass and tides, of small treasures, of the color of the sky when it's neither day nor night. Their words flowed like the sea itself, meandering, soft and always returning. Now and then she would hold up a piece of glass, place it in the light, and speak to it softly. This one is for a memory I haven't lived yet, but will. And Luca, watching her, felt the warmth rise gently through him, not like fire, but like morning sun through thin clouds. They compared the pieces they had gathered, and as they placed them side by side on the stone ledge, they noticed something remarkable. Some matched, not in color but in curve, two halves of the same shape, worn by the same waves, edges softened by time together. They looked at one another, smiling quietly. It didn't feel like coincidence. It felt inevitable. Like a story remembered just as it begins. The sky deepened into night blue. The stars above shimmered faintly, not loudly, just enough to feel them there. And the sea, as always, kept its lullaby going. Side by side, they watched the tide, their shoulders almost touching. Not quite, but nearly, and in that space between them, a thread shimmered, unseen but certain, soft and slow, and pulling gently. The night settled deeper around them, and the stars brightened slowly, one by one, not like a burst, but a gentle unfolding, as if the sky were exhaling light. The cove remained still, wrapped in hush, the kind of hush that comes not from absence of sound, but from presence of peace. The sea whispered against the shore, and somewhere in the rocks above, wind moved like silk between stone. Luca and the woman whose name he still didn't know sat close now. The space between them had softened. Their shoulders touched from time to time, lightly, like two waves brushing at the edge of the shore. She leaned forward and began arranging the sea glass in a small spiral on the stone between them. I used to come here, she said softly, before I even understood why. I'd find pieces and feel like they knew me. She paused, placing a pale amber shard at the center. I think I was waiting. Luca watched the spiral take form, then reached into his own coat pocket and added a piece, the warm one from earlier. It fit naturally into the pattern she had begun. I never found this place until tonight, he murmured, but it feels like I've been walking toward it for years. She looked at him then fully, quietly, not with surprise, not with curiosity, but with a kind of deep calm, as if we've both been collecting pieces, she said, and now we're simply bringing them home. The wind shifted slightly, curling around them with a cool softness. Without a word, she reached behind her, took the soft wrap from her shoulders, and gently draped half of it across his. It wasn't bold. It wasn't shy. It was natural, like placing a blanket over something that had always belonged together. Luca didn't speak. He didn't need to. He only leaned a little closer, and in that moment, the space between them ceased to be space at all. Just a warm, shared silence. They sat like that for a long while. She hummed once a tune that seemed older than memory, slow and curling like smoke. Luca closed his eyes, just briefly, and let the sound carry through him. It wasn't music. Not really. It was more like a feeling being remembered. She spoke again, later, in a voice barely above the hush of the sea. I never hoped for this, not truly, but sometimes. When I'd speak to the glass, I'd imagine a presence beside me. Not a face, not a name, just someone. Still, he nodded. I used to think the pieces I found were fragments of something bigger, not just a bottle or bowl, but something meant to hold something important, like light or time. They smiled, not with amusement, but with knowing, the kind of smile that doesn't break silence, it deepens it. Together, they watched as the tide crept gently forward, closer now to the spiral of sea glass between them. The water would reach it soon, but neither of them moved. Let it touch, she whispered. It'll remember. The waves rolled in delicate, brushing the edges of the glass, and just for a moment the pieces shimmered, a faint glow as if stirred by something unseen, as if the sea too remembered. Luca's hand found hers, not suddenly, just. Gradually, their fingers met like dusk meets night slowly, softly, with no clear beginning. And as their hands rested together, open between them like a folded page, the cove seemed to grow even quieter, not asleep but sacred. There, in the stillness, time became something else, not forward, not past, just present and full, the spiral of glass between them had softened in the tide's embrace, half submerged now, gleaming under moonlight like a constellation drawn in sand. And still they remained side by side, quiet, wrapped in the shared warmth of a simple wrap and the even simpler closeness of two people who no longer needed to speak. Luca gently turned the piece of sea glass in his hand, the one that had led him here, and held it up between them. It caught the moonlight just so, revealing a soft translucence within, like fog held in memory. And then he noticed her eyes were already looking at the same piece. She reached into her coat pocket and drew out a nearly identical shard, shaped just slightly differently, but matching in color, in size, in the way it curved like a smile pressed flat by time. Wordlessly, they placed the two together on the stone between them. A perfect fit, two halves of one piece. Time perhaps had taken them across different waves, different shores, but now the edges aligned, the years had shaped them gently. So they could arrive here, whole together. She smiled without looking up. Sometimes I wondered if the sea would keep us apart forever. Let us pass close, brush near, but never meet. Luca's voice was a whisper. But the sea doesn't break things, it softens them. She turned toward him then, eyes calm, full. I think we were always moving toward this cove. And he nodded, slowly, not just in agreement, but in quiet awe, as if every wave was a breath, every step a whisper. Their foreheads rested together then gently, no pressure, just the soft touch of presence. The warmth of breath mingled. No kiss, not yet, just a closeness deeper than gesture, a silence deeper than speech. Their hands, still entwined, stayed warm in the cool night, and the sea glass glowed faintly beside them. They stood at last, slowly together, fingers still linked. The tide had pulled back again, and the spiral of glass had been smoothed in two. Glimmering memory, like a secret written in water. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They walked slowly along the edge of the water, back through the hidden path, past the tall grasses swaying like gentle hands waving them on, back along the beach where the stars had deepened into their full brightness. And, as they walked, their steps matched, not because they tried, but because they'd always been meant to, their pockets full of sea glass, their silence full of song, and between them, something soft and forever forming, not an ending. Not a beginning, but a return to what had always waited. Later that night, long after the cove had disappeared behind them and the moon had lifted high above the sea, Luca and the woman, her name still unspoken, but no longer needed, sat on the soft rise of the dunes near the shore. Below them, the ocean shimmered with moonlight. Above, stars moved slowly across the sky, like soft thoughts drifting through a quiet mind. They sat on a woolen blanket, their shoulders touching, a shared silence folding gently around them. Between them, a small pile of sea glass chosen. Pieces, gently washed and glinting like candlelight in the hush. Neither spoke. The world didn't need words now. And in the stillness, something gentle settled, not an answer, but an understanding, that love, the kind they had wandered toward, was never loud. It didn't crash like waves or burn like fire. It drifted, soft and slow, like sea glass tumbled in water, like two people meeting in silence and finding they had known each other always. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he turned just slightly to rest his cheek atop her hair. Their hands, once separate, now rested as one in the softs and beside them. The breeze lifted faintly, not cold, but cool, brushing along their faces like fingers made of salt. And time, far off, the tide whispered its lullaby, and the sound was like breathing, slow, even eternal. The pile of sea glass beside them caught the moonlight, and for a moment it glowed, each piece a flicker of memory, each shape a story waiting to be told in dream. And perhaps they dreamed already, eyes still open, but minds adrift, no longer needing to know what came next. Because sometimes a feeling is enough. Sometimes a quiet presence is more than any promise, and sometimes, love arrives not as thunder or light, but as something softened by water and kissed by time. In that moment, nothing needed to happen. Nothing needed to be said. The sea continued to move, the moon continued to shine, and two souls, once walking separate shores, now rested together, still and sure. As the night deepened, and the stars blinked slower, Luca whispered, almost dreamlike, maybe we were always part of the same piece, just waiting for the sea to bring us home. She didn't answer with words, only a smile, and in the hush that followed, they let their eyes fall closed, not into sleep, but into stillness. The sea cradled the shore, the wind softened to a breath, and above them, the stars looked on quiet, old, and full of knowing. And now, dear listener, let your eyes drift closed too. Let your breath slow. Let the quiet of the ocean in your mind stretch like soft silk across your thoughts. You are safe. You are held. And somewhere in the hush between waves, love glows gentle, warm, and waiting like sea glass beneath the moon. Good night. May you dream of quiet coves and timeless hearts. May you rest and remember.